Okay, so now I would like to introduce Gary Kahn, who will be introducing today's speaker. Gary?
Yes, it is. It's really my pleasure today to introduce John Henderson, who's coming to us from Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And I want to just tell you a bit of a Rotary serendipity, how we happened to get John here today to be our speaker. So Shawnee and I met John and his wife Jean a month ago, riding on a train from San Francisco to Oakland Airport. And we saw the Rotary wheel on their luggage tag, and we struck up a conversation. All of us were in the Bay Area actually visiting our sons. And as it turned out, we were also going on the same flight to Denver. So while waiting in the airport, we talked about Rotary and traveling. And John asked if Shawnee and I knew about the International Travel and Hosting Fellowship. And we said we didn't, but we actually learned about it, and it was fascinating. And it seemed like many of you who travel a lot, especially internationally, would love to know about this as a valuable resource. And it was clear that we just met an enthusiastic and well-informed Rotary Fellowship ambassador. So we exchanged contact information, and a couple days later, we got together for lunch in Boulder and learned even more. So when I got home and I discovered that the current Rotarian cover was all about fellowships, and our own brew came out proclaiming June Rotary Fellowship Month. And then Chad, President-elect Chad, announced that we got this competition for our Boulder Rotarians to try to connect with other clubs when we were traveling. So when the speaker slot today unexpectedly opened up, well, the die was cast. So I was curious, how many of you know or have heard about the International Travel and Hosting Fellowship? Just hold up your hand. Not too many of our members. I certainly didn't, but if you're like Shawnee and I, or me, you're in for a big treat as John shares with us his vast knowledge and insights into the whole world of Rotary Fellowships, and in particular into the International Travel and Hosting Fellowship. John?
So that was serendipitous to meet Gary and Shawnee. And I had spent a week with my cousin in Longmont after we met on the way to the airport. And actually, I wanted to say I did come up to Boulder, and my wife was going on a hike that I didn't go on. She went with her cousin, and I visited the Boulder Museum, and I wanted to tell you how wonderful that museum is. And if you haven't been there, it's great. And the people that were running it were also great. So I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed that museum. But I'm going to talk about fellowships today, and I'm going to try to share my screen here, hopefully shortly. That should work out fine. I'll start with this. Hopefully we'll get there quickly. Now, do you see the Rotary Fellowship screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I've been part of the Travel and Hosting Fellowship for a long time, but there's really fellowships for every interest that there is, and it's what the great beauty of fellowships are. While they're not official Rotary programs, they're run by Rotarians and are for the use of Rotarians that have similar interests. And what are they? They're voluntary groups. Rotary is not sponsoring them or supporting them, but Rotarians are. So there's everything. And I have to be careful how many attorneys are in your club, but I always wondered if Rotarian had to have their own fellowship so they could have some friends. I didn't know if that was good or not, but there's actually a fellowship for almost everybody's interest. It'd be hard to find somebody that didn't find a fellowship that would be something to be in, but what it does is it expands your Rotary world. In my case, in my wife and my case, we've got friends all over the world, mainly through Rotary, both from Youth Exchange and from our Travel and Hosting Fellowship. But there's many interests and I don't know how many of you know this, but there are 89 fellowships. There actually might be more than that now, with 50,000 Rotarians in over 160 countries that are part of them. There's things like International Fellowship of Flying Rotarians, or Yachting Fellowship, or Canoeing. Now, what's interesting is, well, I don't. You could say, well, I don't have a plane, or I don't have a yacht. It doesn't matter. You can be, if you like to go flying, you can join the Flying Fellowship and team up with somebody that has a plane, or possibly has a yacht that you could go on a trip with. It's amazing what's out there. There's things like scuba diving. I kind of stick strictly to snorkeling myself. There's fishing, and apparently these guys were good because they certainly had big fish. There's all kinds of things. Photography. I don't know how many of the Rotarian photographers actually compete in the Rotarian photography contest every year, but I'm guessing some of them do. There's quilters, fiber artists, bird watching. I mean, it's amazing the different fellowships there are for people to belong to. Now, there's a couple of fun ones. There's the Beer Fellowship, and there's also the Wine Fellowship. The Wine Fellowship has one of the coolest little pins because it's a corkscrew, of course, with a rotary wheel that says they're part of that fellowship. Some Rotarians like to go on the cruise boats all the time. They belong to a cruise fellowship. There's one for singles. It's not like a dating site. It's more for single people that want to travel with other Rotarians or do things with other Rotarians, but not necessarily looking for a lifelong partner, although it may happen. There's chess. I mean, these are just some samples. As you can see, I'm not going to go through 79 of these, but I'm going to hit a few more. There's, for the people that like to be really active, there's tennis, hiking, golf, cricket. Cricket's probably more popular in other countries than the U.S. I don't know if anybody plays cricket here, but if they do, they probably came from India or Pakistan. There are magicians. I don't know if you got a magician in your club, but there's a whole fellowship just for magicians. There's military vets, and it isn't just military vets from the U.S., it's from everywhere. And then there's motorcyclists, there's bicyclists, there's railroads, and that's big railroads and miniature railroads. And there's more. So but then there's I'm going to spend a little time on the ITHF because that's the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart. But it's I'm going to give you an example of how it works because all the fellowships kind of work similarly. They almost all have a website and a Facebook page, and you can keep in touch with people that they have activities. I know about 3 years ago, the Golfing Fellowship had their annual golf outing at a city very close to where I live. I'm not a golfer, but it was neat to hear that they were going to be in our area. So the Travel and Hosting Fellowship has two different parts to it. One is that while it says international, it doesn't mean it has to be international. You can host or be hosted by members anywhere in the world. So I could come and stay with Gary if he joins the group, or he could come and stay with me. But you could also, I've had guests from Pakistan and South Africa and England and Germany and several from around the U.S., including Hawaii, which is next month. We're going to Hawaii with our family to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. And we're going to stay my wife and I are going 3 days early. We're going to spend 3 days with a member of the fellowship on Maui that actually has been and stayed with us before. So that's kind of how it works. Now, you say, well, I don't have room or I'm uncomfortable having people stay in my house. That's okay. There's no obligation to be a host and have them stay in your house. It could be just to get together, provide information about the area. It's whatever you're comfortable doing. Although I've had a lot of my own friends say, well, how can you have somebody come and stay in your house that you don't know? And of course, the answer is they're Rotarians. I would never have a problem with a Rotarian coming and stay in my house. But everybody doesn't feel the same. The other part that we do is, and so on their website, which I'll get to in a minute, there's a way to look up a member. If you're going to take a trip somewhere, you can look up and find out, is there someone there that maybe I could hook up with? And it always depends on whether it's convenient for them. So it's not an obligation. There's no obligation to host unless it's a convenient thing. But the other part of it is that before and after each one of the international conventions, when we have them in person, I'm actually today, I don't know how many of you are on, but I was on the pre-convention today listening to some youth exchange things. So But next year the convention's in Houston. There's tours before and after each convention. So last year or 2 years ago when it was in Hamburg, my wife and I joined the pre-tour that ITHF set up to Russia, which was just fabulous. And then they also had a post-tour that we didn't go on to Germany. And it was just, you meet people of similar interests because they're all interested in traveling a lot, and they get together. And we've just made some lifelong friends through this group. So and some people only go on the tours. They never host anybody. They never travel to stay with somebody. They just want to go on the tours, and that's fine. It's part of the fellowship. So there's a lot of ways to do it. So on the website, you can look up, say you're going to go somewhere. You're going to go to Alberta. You look up, you put in Alberta, and this is what comes up. There's some members, and you click on their name, and it'll give you their contact information and their interests and what club they belong to and what might be nearby, how long they've been at Rotary. They're always like I said before, they're always at the convenience of the host. So in the tours, the bottom picture here is actually in Taiwan, and the president of our fellowship about 4 or 5 years ago was from Taiwan. And people don't often go to Taiwan on vacation, but it's a wonderful country. And he said, well, we want to share our country with the members of this fellowship. So they set up a tour that my wife and I went on, and it was so successful, they've actually done 3 or 4 more since then to get other people to come to Taiwan. It's a wonderful country. And I encourage us. Unfortunately, that's where we're supposed to be right now for the convention, but it didn't happen. So there's a newsletter, and this is really an expensive fellowship to belong to. The dues are $75. Well, it's $50 for 1 year, but it's $75 if you sign up for 3 years, and I don't know why anybody wouldn't do that. And that's just to cover the cost of keeping the website up and everything. Now the newsletter, everything's done via email. But it's all by volunteers, so like everything in Rotary, nobody gets paid. So it's a great thing to do, but actually if you do an exchange or stay with someone or have someone stay with you and you write up a nice little article about it and you send that in to the newsletter editor with a photo or two, and they publish it, you get a free year's membership. So you could, if you actually participate, you could be a member forever for free. How do you join? I'm going to show. I'll take you to this website in a minute. But there's basically we just redid our website. What does it cost? As I said, it's $75 for 3 years for this fellowship, but every fellowship is different. Some are free. Some have it says on here, the Wine Appreciation has a lifetime membership for $100 US. So that's kind of that. I'm going to see if I can make this work now and go to our website. Can you see the ITH website? Can somebody let me know if we can see that? Okay, good. So the website's pretty easy to remember. It's ithf.org for organizations. So what happens is you can come in here and obviously right on the front page, there's up here it says join ITHF, but there's a, let's see what comes up. I'm not there. So there's some frequently asked questions. There's an overview of the whole organization. There's a link to join. It's about the connections you make. There's a newsletter, and through the website when you're logged in, which I don't want to have people watch me click a bunch of screens on that. So when you're logged in, you can search members to see if you want to find somebody. You can learn about the events and tours. Unfortunately, the tour here was virtual, so we didn't have they were going to have a tour of northern Japan, which I would have gone on to had we had the convention. So that's where that is. Now, there's, while I'd love it and unfortunately, there's not a member of this fellowship in your club. That I looked up on our website, and I've got a list of all the members, and I looked through it, and there's nobody from Boulder. There's quite a few from Colorado, but not Boulder. So there's a real opportunity to get in on joining this. I want to go back here and see if I can get. I had another one picked out here, so I'm going to see if I can get to it. Oh yeah, so if you want to know what the other fellowships are, it's really easy. Whoops, I had it for a second. You just Google Rotary Fellowships, and this is what comes up. And what's pretty cool is that they're all listed here. All these fellowships. So there's even, four-wheel drivers, amateur radios. I mean, you name it. There's a fellowship for your interest. Marathon running. I'm more of a 5K guy myself. There's even heavy metal, not metalhead. People who like the heavy metal music. I'm too old for that too, unfortunately. But there's really a lot of things going on here. Peace fellows, photographers, even police and law enforcement. You name it. So again, you just Google Rotary Fellowships and you'll find a lot of options to go here. It's really great. Now the other thing you can do, I want to show you one more. There's one of these. It's Rotary, because I think this is important. It's a Rotary Means Business Fellowship. And this is really unknown, but Rotary started by people doing business with each other in Chicago. Paul Harris and his work colleagues met and formed Rotary. But this is about promoting your business and doing business with Rotarians and helping everybody succeed. What can be better? I personally have always tried to do business with Rotarians when I can, because I feel I always get treated honestly and get great service. And there's again, organizations, parts of this organization around the world. I don't think doesn't look like there's one in Colorado, but you can start one, just so you know this is the type of thing that you can actually have. And then there's another whole separate, it isn't fellowships, but it's Rotary action groups. Now some of you may be part of these. This is like the Environmental Sustainability Action Group or the Water and Sanitation Action Group. And again, you just Google Rotary Action Groups and you get this list and how to join or how to become part of it. This is more on the service end of Rotary, but that's why I wanted to bring it up, because we're usually all about service. So here's all the different groups by area of focus. I mean, domestic violence, you name it. There's, again, if you're a typical Rotarian and have a special interest in trying to help in a certain part of the needs that are out there, there's probably a way to be part of a Rotary action group to do that. So I wanted to send a net. So I don't want to spend a lot more time, but I'm happy to ask questions, or if anybody wants me to actually go into the ITHF website, I could do that. But let's see what questions we might have.
Okay, well, thank you, John. This is Mike Brady, and I've got a couple questions before I open it up to the membership. So Boulder Rotary, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat and we'll get to it. So I was just curious, how many people, I'm just trying to get an idea of like how many are in the international travel, but what are the sizes of most of the groups?
Well, I can tell you that the ITHF group has about 1,100 members right now.
Okay, that's quite a lot.
And I think we're in about 60, we're in about 60 different countries, I believe, at the present time.
And are there like officers that get elected? I mean, who runs the website? That looks pretty nice.
Yeah, well, we fortunately have some really good members from Southeast Asia that have helped, that had some interns that actually put all this together for our website, and it worked out well. We kind of lucked out because our website wasn't as good as it should be, and then it crashed and burned right in the beginning of the pandemic, but nobody could go anywhere anyway, so we had time to rebuild our website and get it up, and it actually has been up about a month now, or maybe not quite, but it works well. I'm not
but are there like
members in the other fellowships.
Are there like guiding documents? I mean, so the direction of it? I mean, I'm just kind of curious, with 1,100 members, democracy is great until you want to get something done. So, I mean, how's that work? Yeah,
we have a president, we have, a whole board of directors and a chain of command that comes up every year, just kind of like a club. And we have what they call vice presidents of different areas in the country. I'm the vice president for the western part of the Great Lakes, which is about 4 states, which I try to help promote the fellowship in primarily in that area, or be a resource for anybody that's a member in the area that's having difficulty. So it's all volunteers. So it's kind of like Rotary, you know, you can't tell people what to do, but you can cajole them or make them feel guilty if they don't.
All right. Well, listen, we do have a question from our President-elect Chad Stam. Chad, would you mind unmuting yourself and ask your question?
Yep. So first of all, I am about to be the first Boulder Rotarian to be in the ITHF. I just have to click the payment button. So I wanted to make sure that we had somebody involved in this. My question is about COVID and how COVID has impacted your fellowship, and what some of those changes and impacts might exist in the future.
Well, of course, it did have a big impact because nobody could go anywhere, and in many cases still can't. But as we get vaccinated, I mean, I've got visitors coming, and I'm going to visit somebody within the next 2 months. So or actually next month. So I think once you're vaccinated, and fortunately in the U.S. we're doing pretty well with that, it's not going to be a problem. But it will be a problem to go to a lot of the parts of the world or have them come to you, because either they won't be allowed to come into the U.S. or you won't want to go there because of the risk. Even if you're vaccinated, there's the jury's still out as to, you know, hopefully if you're vaccinated, even if you get infected, it'll be very, very minor. You may not even know you had it, but you know, I don't want to be the one to find that out. But it will have an effect. Although, like right now, is anybody in your club been logged in, or is going to the convention, or actually starts tomorrow?
Yeah, I've logged into it, and I've been on there. And I guess more of the question I had though was from an RI perspective. So I'm pretty heavily involved with Youth Exchange, and you know,
Yes, I am.
Our program got completely wiped out for this next year, and nothing's happening. And I didn't know if RI had mandated that you guys sort of shut things down, or if they're leaving it up to the fellowship.
You know, yeah, I'm heavily involved in Youth Exchange also, and we're the same boat. And that's an RI program. The fellowships are not RI programs; they're Rotarian-run programs. Now, there's some things to say you're part of a Rotary fellowship that you have to comply with as far as signage and all that kind of stuff, but it's not too bad. I mean, they're not going to tell us that we can't travel. They'll leave it up to us to make sure we're doing things correctly. But with Youth Exchange, that's a whole other thing, because you're sending kids around the world and you want to make sure they're safe.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is from George Garmany. George, would you mind going ahead and ask your question?
Unmute. Yes. Well, anybody could log into your website and so forth. And so I'm wondering, do the fellowships check to make sure that applicants or the members are all actually Rotarians? And how do we know for sure that they're all part of RI?
Well, you can't log into our website without becoming a member. And to become a member, you fill out the form, and somebody does check to make sure you're actually a legitimate Rotarian, or you don't get accepted. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of checks and balances, and that's a good point. But I think that's probably part of the Rotary rules for fellowships that you have to follow. They're for Rotarians and their families.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, let's say that I wanted to start a fellowship. How would I go about doing that, John?
Well, if you I can go back to that page, but I think if you Google Rotary Fellowships, one of the first things that comes up is how to start a fellowship.
Oh, okay. So Google does know everything.
Just
so
it takes you to a Rotary page. It's actually is part of the RI website, but it's open to look at. So just Google Rotary Fellowships, and the page that comes up is the one I showed you, where it had the whole list of all of the different fellowships. And part of that, I kind of scroll by it, but there's a how do I start a fellowship? Or in case of action groups, how do I start an action group?
Okay, great. Yeah, because I want to have a questions and answers moderators fellowship, because I feel pretty lonely a lot of the time. So, yeah.
Well, actually, there is just to kind of follow. There is one for IT people on there.
Okay, well, I'll try to not take that as an insult, but okay, so listen, Bill Meyer has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Bill.
Thanks. My question is sort of the social side of the various fellowships, not just the International Travel Fellowship, but other fellowships like the Genealogy Fellowship and the Beer Fellowship and people like that. Do they have get-togethers at international conventions?
Absolutely, but many of them also have get-togethers on a regional basis or country basis too. So the answer to your question is there's a lot of opportunities for fellowship. And of course, now that we've all learned about Zoom, you can have, like here today, we've got people from several countries, and that's the way the fellowships can actually have some social things. There's a few people in the ITHF that have been having a social cocktail party every Sunday night for a while. I've gone to a couple of those. You're drinking alone, well, I guess with my wife, but you have friends watching you.
I'm not sure.
But to answer your question, they all have things at the convention. In fact, if you're logging into the convention this year, which I hope you are, because this is a great opportunity to go if you've never been, and there's a whole in the House of Friendship, almost all the fellowships have a booth, a virtual booth that you can go on and find out more about them.
Thank you.
Hey, great. Thank you very much. Jim Radowski, you've got the next question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
John, I just wanted to thank you so much for bringing this information to the club. I think it's terrific, and I'm excited about looking at the various fellowships and seeing which ones I might want to join. Can you share with us the most memorable experience you've had as part of the fellowship?
I've had many, but I'll tell you one. It was really interesting in particular because about 6 years ago or so, my wife and I took an organized trip to India for 5 weeks. We actually had 2 back-to-back tours, but it wasn't Rotary. But as I said earlier, I'd been on a tour of Taiwan, and on that tour, which was an ITHF tour, there was several couples from India on the tour. So when I was going to go to India, I looked up to see if any of them were living where I was going to be on this tour. Well, it turned out that one couple was. We were in Cochin in southern India on the west coast, and we were there for 3 days. We got together. He gave us a tour of things we wouldn't have seen. We found out about things we were going to see. We had lunch together, dinner together, and it turned out that this fellow, his name is KC, or his American name, he says, well, he joined Rotary the same year I did, which was, at that time was 1969, so it was like not quite 50 years before. Now it's been 52. But when we got together, we're talking about Rotary. He says, well, I'm the friendship exchange chair of our district. He said, you should do a friendship exchange with our district. I said, well, hey, that's great. I'll find out who the chair is when I get home in our district, and I'll put him in touch with it. So I came home and I called up our incoming district governor because it was about time for changing the guard. I said, who's the chair? She said, well, I'm not sure. Let me find out. I'll get back to you. About 3 days later, she called back and she says, well, guess what? We don't have one, so I guess it's you. Does that sound like a Rotary program? So actually, and then she says, and by the way, I met a district governor from the district next to the one you're talking about, and they want to do one too. So we're going to do 2 simultaneous exchanges with Southern India. And I spent about a year getting that all organized, not alone, but and that all went off. But in the end, I didn't go. I'd been to India. I was planning to go, but we had a fellow from a club in my county that said, man, I want to go. I said, well, there's no space left. And I said, look, I've been. You haven't been. You need to go. He came and gave a program at my club about his experience, but he spent half the time telling him how grateful he was that we let him go. Because instead of going ourselves, it was just it's a life-changing event to visit a country like India. So I think that's kind of ties friendship exchange, ITHF, and just travel in general all together.
All right.
And we're fabulous friends with this couple now.
That's great.
Wonderful. Well, John, I know you touched upon it, but one of the members asked this question, which is what's the difference between a Rotary action group and a Rotary fellowship? Would you mind expanding upon that?
Sure. Well, the fellowships are primarily areas of interest, from a social standpoint or an activity standpoint, whereas the action groups are really about doing service projects. Working hard on environmental issues or water and sanitation, or there's many others that sell. But really, if you got a passion about helping either in some part of the world or in some particular part of then helping with the needs there, and it could be in the U.S. for that matter. It doesn't matter. We got plenty of needs here too. That's action group is more like taking action to raise money to do global grants or similar things, or getting districts or clubs together to do a project. Whereas the fellowships are not really about fellowship, about things that you like. Like I like to travel, so we like to get with people that like to travel. In fact, another example of that is when I said I'm going to go to spend a couple of days with my son in Oakland again. He's getting married, and they just moved into a different house in Berkeley. Well, there's no place for us to stay, so I looked up, and there's a woman there in the ITHF. We're going to stay with her for 3 days. She'd never hosted anybody before, but she's happy to do it because the Rotarians help each other, That'll be, I'm sure and I looked, and on our website, it lists all the places you've traveled or want to travel. I could almost, her interests and where she'd been and where she wants to go are almost exactly the same as ours.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a question from District Governor-elect Faye Campbell. Go right ahead, Faye.
Hello. Hi, John. Were you at the virtual travel with Russia last week with ITHF?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so.
And I was also on the trip, the real trip and the virtual trip.
And I was on a trip to Russia, but with the Friendship Exchange, because I was my district Friendship Exchange chair. So we were doing parallel trips. I thought so. And one of the things that you did not mention is that ITHF is now doing a virtual tour. And the next one is in Taiwan. I've been to Taiwan myself too, but the next one is in Taiwan. So what ITHF has been doing now that we cannot take the plane is doing virtual travel. So you should invite the club along to come to the virtual travel meeting.
Well, I'll send the link, because these are open to anybody. I'll send the link on to your club so that you can let people know in the club in your bulletin if they want to come to have a virtual trip to Taiwan. They'll be able to do it. It's coming up soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Faye, for that information, and John passing that on. And I know that Anne Marie Reeder has the last words here. So go right ahead, Anne Marie.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you, John, so much for such an interesting, informative discussion today. And I certainly am very excited to learn about all the fellowship opportunities, as I'm sure a lot of our members are. I'm the social chair for Rotary, and I'm also an avid international traveler. And so I was going to be the second person to sign up from our club for the ITHF, but it looks like now I'll be the 6th, 7th, or maybe 8th. There's a lot of people from the chat that have indicated that they are going to join the ITHF. So, it's very nice to learn about these opportunities, and I'm excited to put them into practice. Also want to say, in your honor, the Boulder Rotary Club is pleased to contribute 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund. After 26 years of arduous work, Rotary and its partners are on the brink of eradicating this tenacious disease. But a strong push is needed now to root it out once and for all. It is conceivable for polio to be eradicated in the next few years. It is a window of opportunity of historic proportions as we move forward with the polio endgame strategy. And so anyway, thank you once again for just a great presentation today. We all really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I don't know if you've announced it, but there's only been 2 wild cases of wild polio in the world this year, and there hasn't been one since January as of June 9th. So there's still only been 2. We may be on the verge.
Thank you.
Right. We are very excited about it, John. And Anne Marie, thank you very much today. And John, thank you so much for joining our club and filling everybody in about all the opportunities for even more fun that they can have with Rotary. And it looks like many people are looking forward to taking advantage of it. And thank you again for joining us.